For years, Tamela Mann was the face of strength and faith. People saw her as the woman who could carry a church service on her own, the voice who would lift thousands out of despair. But behind every Sunday best and every billboard was a reality almost no one wanted to believe. Her children, the ones who watched the world cheer for a family they barely recognized at home, kept their pain hidden until the truth finally shattered the surface. Tia, her daughter, was the first to put words to what everyone else tried to ignore. She said her mother was never treated as a wife, never allowed the comfort of being just a woman, tired and human. To the world, Tamela Mann was unstoppable. Inside their house, she was breaking, one piece at a time. Tia's voice didn't shake when she said her mother wasn't allowed to rest, to breathe, to be anything but the engine that kept the gospel business running. Tiffany, hearing her sister open the wound, could barely steady her own thoughts. She told the world what she'd seen night after night. Their mother, sobbing herself to sleep, only to fix her face and step on stage like nothing was wrong. It didn't matter if Tamela was sick. It didn't matter if her heartbreak or exhaustion showed up in her eyes. The show went on, and their father only saw the numbers that came with another full house. At home, Portia Mann grew up realizing their family's sanctuary was a theater, more stage than safe place. The man who was called Dad was replaced by a manager, one obsessed with control and the next big tour. And David Jr., once his father's greatest defender, eventually couldn't do it anymore. He watched his mother fade before his eyes, watched ovations kill a piece of her each night, watched his father perfect an image for the public, even as the woman behind the curtain grew smaller and less able to stand. This isn't just another story of a family in trouble. At its core is the making and almost unmaking of a legend, and of the high cost that came with each of Tamela Mann's greatest moments. Each of her children remembers the moment the silence finally gave way. David Jr., as unable to hold his pain any longer, went live to the world on Instagram. His words broke open the gospel community. "My mom didn't just become sick," he said. "She was worked until she had nothing left." The words landed like punches. She was dying and the world was clapping. If fans were shaken, those closest to the industry felt the ground move. Suddenly, the carefully built image of a perfect family, perfectly branded on faith, was cracked. In that crack, everyone finally saw the betrayal they never wanted to believe. Then Portia stepped forward, her voice soft but steely, holding a journal worn with tears and secrets. She read aloud words never meant for a crowd. "I feel tired in my bones. David says I need to push through, but sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I didn't wake up." Those pages were written 3 weeks before Tamela collapsed. It wasn't just being tired. Weeks of headaches, blurry vision, and confusion had been brushed off as just stress by her husband. Every time she begged for a break, she was given supplements she hadn't requested, propped up by faith but not by compassion. It was Tia who described the moment that would forever divide their lives into before and after. Atlanta, backstage, Tamela slumped on a couch, unable to catch her breath, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold a water bottle. Crew members panicked and reached for their phones, but David Sr., standing over them, cool and commanding, stopped them. No one was calling for help. "She's just dehydrated," he said. "Give her some water. She's got 3 songs left." Tamela went out that night, sang, and collapsed. Afterwards, there was no more pretending for her children. They saw everything they'd tried so hard not to see. That's when more questions started. Unmarked pill bottles in the kitchen, unfamiliar nurses coming and going, meal plans suddenly switching without warning. Every question from the kids hit a wall. If they pushed, David Sr. pushed back harder. Tiffany, unable to hold her anger, put it simply. "My mom wasn't living. She was surviving inside a brand he controlled. All the finances, the schedules, the medicine, even Tamela's rest, every bit of it was dictated by David Sr. Then, out of nowhere, David Jr. received a package that broke the last sliver of denial. No return address, just a USB stick inside. What he saw made him sick. Secret recordings of Tamela in backstage dressing rooms, looking lost and pleading for a break. Clips of her whispering that she couldn't feel her fingers, that something wasn't right. And always David Sr.'s voice off camera, telling her to push through, that there were people waiting. For the show, for her pain, for his profit. That was when her children decided it was enough. They took everything to a lawyer, to a doctor, and finally to court. Blood tests, records of medication, and the biggest shock of all, the doctor who signed off for Tamela to perform on tour was a fake. No license, no clinic, just a forged signature and a name with no record anywhere. It was as if their mother's very life had been rerouted by lies, not just as a spouse, but under the eyes of the law, of her fans, of heaven and the world itself. By the time an investigation finally began, Tamela was in a medically induced coma. Everything she'd given, her voice, her energy, left the room filled only with beeping machines and 4 children who were anything but silent now. They filed for emergency guardianship. They froze the family brand's accounts. They called a press conference. With cameras rolling, Portia held up a bag of unmarked pills found in their mother's kitchen. "They're not vitamins," she told the silent press. "They contain sedatives, banned from sale in the United States. The only person who administered them was our father." That was the moment the gospel empire fell. David Sr. was no longer the model husband. The mask was off. The fallout blew through the community. Churches pulled out of bookings. Gospel festivals quietly scrapped his appearances. Pastors and singers who once called David Sr. their brother in Christ began to speak up. One gospel star went live on Facebook and said what so many were too scared to admit. "I saw her crying backstage. She begged for a night off. He wouldn't let her." The cost of all those sold-out shows, all those standing ovations, had almost been a woman's life. But then something happened that no one expected. 32 days after the guardianship battle, Tamela's children sat by her hospital bed, waiting for a sign. Portia's voice trembled as she read from her mother's old journals. Tia clung to her hand. Tiffany played quiet hymns. David Jr. could only whisper, "We're here, Mama. He can't hurt you anymore." And then it happened. Her fingers moved. Her eyes fluttered open. She was still there. Not restored, not healed, not the singer seen by millions on stage, but present. The moment was quieter than any concert. A simple whisper. "I didn't know how to stop him." That was all her children needed. The fight was on. From that moment, there was no more looking away. Tamela had finally, even in the smallest way, named her pain. Her kids shifted from sorrow to resolve. They brought in new lawyers, new evidence, new fire. David Jr. uncovered a leak. A voice memo from one of the nurses, gone into hiding, and a paper trail showing $1. $3 million moved into shell companies controlled by David Sr. Medical experts confirmed what fans had whispered about struggling pop stars. The sedatives and stimulants in Tamela's system were a keep her running cocktail, not care. Nothing about her treatment had anything to do with faith. The court ruling that followed echoed like a choir in a silent church. David Sr. was banned from Tamela's hospital, her estate, her brand. And as the family walked outside, Tiffany faced the media for the first time, voice steady, hands unclenched. "This isn't a smear campaign. It's a rescue mission. Our mother was dying in plain sight. The man who promised to love her let it happen." Even then, David Sr. tried to put out a statement, blaming the devil and the media storm. Nobody was listening anymore. Comments poured in from fans. "Stop hiding behind God. You nearly destroyed her. We believed in you. Now we know who you really are." Almost overnight, the music world closed its doors to him. Sponsors vanished. Promoters pulled out quietly but quickly. Even gospel radio quietly removed his name from playlists, and for the first time, no one argued. What mattered now wasn't the family's public image, it was Tamela's private healing. Inside the hospital, her room changed from a sterile ICU into a sacred retreat. Tia started writing a journal, her pen recording hopes for her mother's peace. Portia brought hymn books from Tamela's youth, reading them aloud as if time could rewind to when the dream hadn't turned into a burden. David Jr. played old videos, wanting his mother to hear herself when joy still rang in her voice. And Tiffany, so quiet outside, sat watch each night, trying to forgive herself for not seeing the warning signs sooner. But every time Tamela blinked or squeezed someone's hand, they knew she forgave them. That kept them going. Meanwhile, the investigation deepened. Evidence of financial exploitation surfaced. David Sr.'s emails revealed a plan to maximize output as deadlines approached. Notes that Tamela's health was slipping, but "she's fine. I've got her on a protocol." Doctors described it as classic exploitation, hidden beneath gospel music. What was once hidden behind stained glass windows was now headline news. Prayer circles were organized across Instagram, not for David, but for Tamela. A hashtag, #LetherRest, spread like wildfire. Short clips of Tamela's old interviews went viral. People saw, with new understanding, the pain beneath her practiced smile. When David Sr. filed a motion to win back guardianship, the judge's response was swift. This isn't about manipulation. It's about a family saving their mother. The motion was thrown out. Slowly, Tamela began to return, not as a singer, not as a star, but as someone allowed to rest for the first time in years. She could blink, squeeze a hand, and on a good day, show tears during a favorite hymn. It was enough. That silent recovery was worth more than any gold record. Night after night, her children talked through the guilt they carried, how the industry, the church, the crowds had blindfolded them to her suffering. David Jr. made a vow to never keep silent again. No more lies for the sake of family image. No more pretending everything was fine. On a quiet Sunday, Portia appeared on a live interview and dropped a bombshell. The family was founding an organization, the Silent Songbird Project. It would fight for women in faith-based industries who were trapped, manipulated, or driven to collapse for the sake of performance. This was never just about their mother, she said. It was about every woman told to smile no matter how much she hurt. Back in Tamela's room, the atmosphere was one of protection, not production. Rest, not rehearsal. Sometimes Tamela would squeeze their hands and ever so faintly try to sing along to an old hymn. She was no longer anyone's product. She was just Tama, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. The world outside kept spinning, rattled but not unchanged. Tamela's story echoed in homes, churches, and studios everywhere. Her children, each in their own way, spoke up, not in anger but in resolve. Tiffany said, "Our mother carried gospel music on her back. She carried our family alone." Their truth stung not just their father, but every institution that let it happen, that clapped and cheered while a woman worked herself toward breaking. Church leaders, gospel insiders, and fans all began to grapple with hard questions. How many other legends had suffered in silence? How many more women were being pushed beyond their limits behind closed doors, told that love meant sacrifice and faith meant unending work? There is a certain quiet at the heart of every storm, the moment after the worst has happened, but before hope really settles in. Tamela now lives in that quiet. Her healing isn't measured in songs sung, but in hours of rest, in forgiveness given, in love that expects nothing in return. Her family's fight isn't for a comeback tour or to rebuild what was lost. It's for a future where no one has to hide their pain behind faith, family, or fame ever again. And so, as the story of Tamela Mann spreads, it becomes something bigger than one woman, one family, or one stage. It's a reckoning for an entire community. The Queen of Gospel didn't just sing hymns, she survived a storm that no crowd ever saw. Behind every hallelujah was a silent negotiation with suffering. Behind every ovation was a small, unnoticed goodbye to a piece of herself. Now it's time the world asks, what do we value more, appearance or truth, fame or freedom? The legend, or the life still fighting quietly in the back room? Tamela Mann gave the world her voice. Now finally, her truth sings too.